Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining in for today's webinar. I am Shaista, your regular host for the webinar. In today's session, we will be discussing the new DoT guidelines for the OSPs and how these changes and regulations are going to be beneficial for the BPOs and the contact center operations. Just a little housekeeping before we get started. If you have any questions during the webinar, please type them into your question box in your Zoom control panel, and I'll bring them up during the presentation, and we will also have time for the questions at the end as well. To take us through the webinar, we have Suryamurthy, CEO at iMarque Solutions, Navneet Gupta and Ashish Goyal, co-founders at Globiva, and Sachin Bhatia, co-founder at Ameyo. Suresh has over 17 years of experience in overall strategic operational responsibility and business development. He's good at managing IT-savvy companies and has expertise spans strategic planning, information management, financial resource management, product development. Welcome, Suresh.
Thank you.
We also have with us Navneet. He's a well-known industry veteran and has over 23 years of work experience with many global organizations. He has held leadership position in Jetpack as vice president and set up its first known captive global client. In his last assignment with Intellinet, Navneet has set up large business operations of over 16,000 people across BFSI, retail, travel, e-commerce, digital, and telecom vertical. He has also worked with Honda Cars and Tata Motors in supply chain management in his earlier engagement. Welcome, Navneet.
Thank you.
Ashish has overall 16 years of work experience. He has extensively worked with business process management industry across multiple geographies. In his last assignment with Intellinet, Ashish led finance function as a financial controller for India and Middle East regions. Prior to this, he has also worked with leading TPA and finance function. He has expertise in corporate financial controllership, taxation, financial planning, and analysis and commercial. Welcome, Ashish.
Thank you.
We have with us Sachin. He's the co-founder and head global sales and marketing. Computer scientist by education. Sachin has been involved in understanding customer engagement solution to consumer-facing companies. He has been working with CIOs and customer experience leaders in over 60 plus countries over the last 16 years, and believe problems in emerging market needs unique solution. Welcome, Sachin.
Thank you so much, Shaista, and welcome everyone. I hope everyone is keeping safe these tough times. Okay, so let me take it up from here. And emerging markets need unique solutions, and I think what we have witnessed during pandemic and how organizations, especially contact centers, responded to that is quite phenomenal. And we have been watching this space of the regulation in India, which has been existing for quite some time for the right reasons. And perhaps for the first time in my brief history of 2 decades of observing regulations, the government has come up with such emphatic clarity, which is for the industry. So very happy to be hosting this talk with my friends and customers from the ecosystem. And from what I understand from the registration, there are a lot of BPOs, folks who are outsourcing, and even some of our competition here. And I think that is great for the ecosystem because this is the time when industry comes together, interprets what has been said, and moves forward. And this is indeed a path-breaking regulation. There are a few things that we want to cover today, and there is an overwhelming curiosity on interpreting the DoT guidelines. So we're gonna go through some of the key aspects and what are the before and after, and we'll be talking to our experts. We have also joined by Mohit today, who's a solution consultant and has been working with the customers very regularly. If there are some very specific questions, we will also bring in our solution consultant and architecture to answer those. Once the regulation is covered, we're gonna talk about what does it mean for the BPOs in terms of what will really change for them. So once the guidelines are set, we all interpreted them. What are the steps that some of the folks who are present in the panel, what are they taking? How are they strategizing around it, and what could people take away from this. So without further ado, let me go to the announcement, right? And it was made by none other than our Prime Minister himself, wherein this was pitched as an ease of doing business, and it is indeed, it makes the opening up of a BPO or outsourcing, both a very, very simple interpretation of what needs to be done, and that is how business should be. And the most interesting part of this statement was registration requirement for OSPs is completely done away with, which means that government doesn't want to interfere at all on who wants to be an OSP and how should they run their business. It's just that they've just mentioned one simple thing, that make sure that you have records and toll bypass has not happened, but everything else is completely open on how you want to run your business. So let's go through some of these guidelines, and I'll bring in Ashish, Suresh, Navneet in corroborating our interpretation. The first category is, of course, it's a end of the license Raj system. There is no license required anymore for somebody to become an OSP. It also increases the competitiveness of IT services, because people would now, and I'll interpret it, but I think one of the biggest thing is the interconnect between OSPs that is now possible, which means you can have on-the-fly overflow happening. You could have capacity if I want, let's say, a different multilingual agent. You could be sharing capacity with other OSPs if required. And for, let's say, somebody like Byju's or a Swiggy, which is outsourcing to multiple OSPs, they could manage their overflows very, very easily. It could also mean that a lot of new investment in the BPO sector, this would encourage outsourcing. So a lot of new BPOs will come in, and the international and the domestic BPO interconnect, and we'll be coming to these points in detail. But essentially, there are a lot of things that would get generated out of it. So let's interpret them one by one. They are broadly in three categories, the interpretation. The first is no registration, no bank guarantees, right? So there is no more an OSP registration required with DoT, no more bank guarantee for remote agents, no WFH permission is required, or even an intimation is not required, no network diagram authorization required, no authorization of VPN is required. So you could have your home agents log in from their broadband without any specific infrastructure. You still want to make sure that the customer data is secure. However, the government doesn't want you to enforce a certain architecture that is there. Then the second category is the infrastructure sharing. You could, and this is a big one, and I'm going to talk to Ashish and Navneet about it. So you had to have separate infrastructure for international and domestic, but you could actually now use the same infrastructure as long as you're not doing a toll bypass. So that saves a lot of redundant infrastructure that was required just to make sure that you are in compliance. And then the third big one is the interconnect between OSP. So let's go one by one. No guarantees, no paperwork required for registration. So before, you required a OSP registration, valid license for 20 years, work from home agent positions. There was a 1 crore guarantee required per OSP center per seat. So this was a guarantee, right? Work from home agents needed prior permission. For domestic and international OSPs, bank guarantee of 50 lakh was required. And all of this has gone away. The biggest ones are, there's nothing called OSP registration anymore. No prior permission required, no security deposits required, and work from home agent unequally. They have just said that's an extended workforce, and there's no other interpretation required, right? So let me bring in, first of all, Ashish. Ashish, how does Globiva interpret this, and about the licenses, the guarantee? How are you guys thinking about it? I know you manage compliance, finance, and those things. Is that something that you guys took notice of?
Yeah. So thanks, Sachin. So how we understand these guidelines? Actually, these are the good guidelines, what we understand, and this is a great move by Government of India. And actually, these guidelines actually eliminates the requirement of, as you highlighted, completely eliminate the requirement of the bank guarantees, like static IPs, regular or frequent kind of submissions or obligations, reporting obligations particularly, and basically like publication of network diagrams, penal provisions, all those now have been removed. So how we interpret, they have simply said in the new guidelines, they have clearly segregated two kind of companies where the BPO runs an invoice business and a non-voice business. So now the non-voice who are only in the data sector do not require, and they are not qualified as a OSP, while the companies or any individual or any kind of firm who deals, any kind of PPM with a voice kind of services will qualify as an OSP. Qualify as an OSP means they are an OSP defined under the law, under the DoT guidelines, but they do not require any kind of registration. So that is a great move. Earlier, it used to be, that how and where you are operating. There are a lot of documentations required, whether it is your own property, whether it is leased property. Those kind of things have been eliminated. You can work from anywhere, wherever you want, but you have to work legally as per the guidelines. Like you have already highlighted, there should not be any kind of toll bypass
Yeah, I think we lost Ashish, but I think what he was trying to say is there should be no toll bypass in any scenario. Yeah, Ashish.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, thanks. So, guys, this is also a very important move because remember, after pandemic, everybody wanted or had to do work from home, and the government of India, I think, announced it till the 31st of December. But talking to a lot of leaders, none of them were able to take long-term decisions because of this this unclear picture of whether this would remain after 31st December or not. Would it go after pandemic? And with this announcement, government has clearly stated that their intention is to keep this has got nothing to do with pandemic now. This is basically a move for the industry, so there is no time limit to this, right? It's not a temporary measure. It's basically a very forward looking reform, if I could call it, on how the BPOs and the BPM industry would work in future. So a very welcome move, and thanks Ashish for your view. Let's go to the next one, the hassles of infrastructure sharing. And this was a very, very big point, especially BPO is an optimization business, right? The whole business is built off that we could run this better and more efficiently than a captive, and we can handle inefficiencies of seasonality, etc. But we run these processes and we aggregate infrastructure better than what a captive can do, and then we bring in the vertical expertise and for value addition. But one of the big pain points was that the same infrastructure, imagine an office. If you can run 3 shifts on it, it's more efficient, right? But you required a different infrastructure. At least at the data center level, there should be no, so there used to be separation of network, 2 network points at each agent desk, so that there's a logical partition, and then obviously a very heavy cost on the data center. Which means that now you can have sharing between international and domestic. You could use the same infrastructure. Still, you're not allowed to do a toll bypass, which means you can't avoid a telco charge of an international call. But at least from a server PBX network sharing, this is completely allowed. And between an OSP's own branches, there is absolutely zero restrictions. So you could have a head office, you could have a branch office, you could be terminating calls and taking voice traffic from your office, from one office to another over PBX. A lot of people had asked the question, can this be done over IP? My interpretation is absolutely yes. Again, they say if you don't bypass the toll. So for example, you cannot obviously take it out of India. That is one, if this is international traffic or even domestic traffic, you can't take it out of India. But within India, across branches, it seems that you could now take it without any concerns on whether this is allowed or not. Suresh sir, any interpretation from you on sharing infrastructure? Was this a pain point for you guys, and how did you guys interpret this? And I know I'll come to Globiva also, because they already stated that there's a huge advantage of this, but let me come to you first.
Yeah. Thank you, Sachin. As Mr. Ashish said correctly, and there was so much hurdle because of OSP. Though we have the OSP license for 17 years, we started for our international call center, then we moved to domestic. Then we had a lot of challenges. We cannot share the info for domestic and international. Though our international business is very low, that we completely wiped out for international, we moved to domestic. Okay, this kind of challenges we had before. Now again, sharing the infrastructure is completely removed, and even work from home is easy now. Okay, so anybody can work from Kashmir to Kanyakumari everywhere. So there won't be any restriction. Even the pandemic situation, since we are a registered OSP, we used to submit all the records. So which IP, work from home, what are work they're doing, what's the traffic going on, who's OSP, all those things we need to submit that to DoT. Now completely wiped out, and it's big relief for us. And again, it's the next stage. Actually, we are moving to it cost cut for us also. Again, we can, as a company, we can make some more revenue, provide some revenue to our client also. So this is one of the good advantages for us. Of course, there will be some more things as usual. We need to take instead of, I think we need to have the recording for 1 year now.
Yeah.
Before that, 3 months or something like that. And the system log also we should maintain for 1 year. That is a basic thing. We are already managing for 3 months. And instead of 3 months, we are moving to 1 year. This is good for us actually. So it's a good move, Sachin. And I think you can change a lot of things here after in the industry. That's what I believe.
Thanks, Suresh. Ashish, let me bring you in again. So what does it mean for Globiva? I know you shared a data point, but
so actually, for the company like us, who are small or mid-sized companies, and maybe you can call it as startups, so who are actually roaming around to get some kind of new business, and actually we welcome this move where government has clearly allowed to share any kind of infrastructure in between national or international OSP centers. Even you have the small kind of business. I remember my days when we started our business 3 years before, we had just around 150 seats on domestic. And we fortunately got some good international business. And there we need to invest a lot for the international. While there were some guidelines that we can have a common infrastructure, but again, for the new companies, it is difficult to arrange a large amount of bank guarantees and all those stuff. Actually, this will help and give us a boost for the newcomers and the new companies to even start with a smaller kind of platform. And with these kind of guidelines, actually, this is a good move actually, and this will save a lot of us. Although we have invested in multiple kind of data centers, but now this move will help us to um, centralize the things and actually better monitoring, better administration at the central level. Actually, we see it is a great move for us in this manner.
So Ashish, and if I could forecast, and look into the future, I see everybody now having 2 data centers, one primary, one secondary, which is the backup. And you would, and I would strongly urge everyone to think about, moving away from your on-prem infrastructure to cloud, because now that is then accessible across. There's a huge advantage. Whether it's private or public is a matter of choice, but you should not have. After this, you should not have any in-house equipment, because you could actually run from anywhere whenever required, and could do this. You would still need to ensure data privacy and all. There are a couple of questions. There is one question from Johnson Verke. I'm assuming he's the Johnson Verke from NTT and Exavaya. Hey, Johnson. The question is, what are the effects of these new regulations on providing hosted contact center service? I'll be taking this up, Johnson, and directly addressing our view on this. There's another question from Nadeem. Since government has done away with the license, who will keep the check on users using service legitimately? First of all, that's the problem of the government, but I'll tell you how we're interpreting it. Everybody is made self-responsible for making sure that you are not bypassing the toll. And you are also required to store 1 year of log so that you can attribute who took the call and where the call was taken and so on and so forth. So the DoT or the telco could still come after you to prove that you have not done anything, and they have usage, right? They would see what is the total usage happening on the telco side, and there would be surprise audits and checks is what I could foresee, right? But the responsibility, as I said, is now not with the regulator or the central body, but with you, right? You will have to make sure that you're not bypassing toll. That's it, right? Now somebody can come after you and say, we want you to prove that you're not bypassing toll, but they are not doubting you from day one. They are not saying that you make sure that your architecture is this and you get it approved from me, right? So you can make a home, for example, and if your home is not in compliance with what the local law is, they could come after you, right? Something, it's that simple an interpretation for me. uh, uh, People who were doing who were the black sheeps, they would continue to do black sheeps. They were earlier also black sheeps. They were not taking license. So I don't see any challenge there. But yes, as a OSP, you have to make sure that there are enough records available, which the government is still saying that anybody who's doing voice should store 1 year uh, records. So another question from Mohammed Anis. Sharing of PBX of infrastructure domestic PSTN line for office use is allowed where one doesn't toll bypass. Do we still need to submit any architecture vendor certificates to DoT? Mohammed Anis, no. There is no requirement to submit anything to anybody, right? There's not even a requirement to declare that I'm an OSP, right? You are just using a voice service as an office, and you are routing calls to your folks, which could be sitting anywhere in India, right? That's the simplest interpretation I could have. So I know it's hard to believe, but this much clarity of intent I have not seen from the government of India in a very, very long time. Okay, let me okay, there are a lot of questions flowing in. So Surendra Sharma is asking, do we take international license from DoT? Can we use same PRI gateway for international which we are using for domestic? Can we do call forwarding from one service provider to OSP service provider? So do we take an international license from DoT? There is no license, guys. For OSP, there is no license. It's very clearly written, there is no license. So if you want to start an international call center, my understanding is you need to take a telco from a service provider who can sell you international calling minutes, right? And you need an infrastructure to host it. That's it. There's no other requirement to become an international call center. Can we use the same PRI or PRI gateway for international, which we are using for domestic? That's exactly what is being said as sharing of infrastructure. And can we do call forwarding from one service provider to other OSP service provider? Not just call forwarding, you can in fact patch it over IP also, is my understanding. You're allowed to interconnect between two OSPs, which is the second part that we will talk about. So I always keep giving this example to my team. Let's say Swiggy has their own infrastructure and they want certain overflow calls to be handled by iMarque or Globiva, right? They could just have an interconnect to their PBX on IP and route those calls, and agents at those locations can now take that. There is no prior MPLS, VPN, or definitely not a telco infrastructure required that you will only route calls on PSTN, right? As long as there is one caller and one guy attending it, you could have it routed, is the interpretation that I have. Okay. Can OSP agents directly connect to PBX dialer platform owned, hosted, managed by their clients in the US? My understanding is yes, but we have to make sure that, so for international, they have clearly said that if your infrastructure is in the US and you are routing it here, I think it's allowed over MPLS or VPN. I'm not sure if it's allowed over public internet, but here the toll bypass point was going to be important. That is those telco, which you're taking minutes from, are they allowed to sell minutes in India or not? That might be a little gray area. You have to check. If somebody has, Navneet, Ashish, Suresh, if you have an opinion, can I have a infrastructure in the US of a customer and can interconnect to that? For captives, it's allowed. That's very clearly stated. But if somebody wants to outsource me, can they terminate there and take calls here? Is that something that you guys have interpreted?
Yeah, it is actually clearly stated in the guidance, new guidelines. You can have EPPX at any kind of foreign location. While they said you need to take care of toll bypass, while you can take the calls in that case over the MPLS or the internet in that case, but we need to make sure that we comply with the other laws like privacy law and other laws, and in case required, we should have the CDR copies for which we are making the calling. So that is a prime most requirement they have depicted multiple times in the documents, that we must have the CDR copies available at the time of inspection. That is only the requirement what I see.
Okay, cool. There's another question. What are the next steps for OSPs who hold valid registration or are in process of migration? Is there a surrender required? I am not qualified to answer that question. I don't think, because there is no longer any license, so there is no renewal. So basically, you can start calling yourself an OSP, and like any new OSP, start using it. Is what my understanding would be. There is nothing that needs to be done of that license. There is no such license anymore. If there are bank guarantees, etc., can you lapse them or not? I think you better consult someone. But my understanding would be, because for new guys it's not required, you guys can just free up that liquidity if it was blocked. Is what my interpretation would be, guys. And please, my request is, please interpret them as our interpretations, right? Though the government has done it with clear intent, we are, as a community, we are trying to interpret it with the intent that the government has, right? You still want to do your checks here, but I can confidently say that I've never seen something like this from the government coming in with such clarity. Okay, let me go to the next thing. So the second is the OSP interconnect. So before, interconnection between two different OSP centers of two different companies was not allowed, which is now allowed. This is a huge one, guys. Now, this means that if, let's say, and I will take the examples of the panelists here. If Suresh and Ashish, let's say they say that I have capacity in North and you have capacity in South, and can we now use each other's facilities and agents if required, to route multilingual calls to Suresh's center, and Suresh can do overflow to Globiva. That's actually allowed now, right? So, for example, they can have an interconnect between these two systems, and Globiva can have their calls handled at iMarque, and iMarque can have their calls handled at Globiva without any compliance requirement. The more interesting interpretation is, as I said, so let's say if a HDFC Bank or a Swiggy or Byju's has their cloud infrastructure, and they want to on the fly decide where should they route the calls, they could actually do that without any pre-decision of what capacity would be handled where. Should I have my PRIs landing at each of the call centers, and I can only route there? So you can have interconnect between the contact center infrastructure at the BPO and the contact center, let's say, cloud infrastructure at the for the principal, right? And you could just interconnect between these two, is my interpretation. Any other thoughts here, Ashish, Suresh, Navneet? Do you think we can interpret any differently, or this is very clear?
I think this is very clear. Before that, we should have different calls and call server. If we want in our side, should have separate call servers to be there. Though I have my application here, I should have separate call center server there. Now it's not required actually. And also the cost wise, there will be two leg before. Okay, so that is also removed now. I'm correct, Sachin? So that's what my understanding. So now two leg, even if we want outbound calls, so two leg, one should go to customer and another leg come to us. It will connect as a conference. Now it's not required. We can straight away connect to the customer through VPN or MPLS straight away.
Absolutely.
So
yeah. Somebody was adding something. Yeah. Okay. So the question that came a while back. So let's take this in context of providers like us. So for us, for example, we could have our infrastructure which we could interconnect with the BPOs, and the calls terminating, and we could take them on IP to these BPOs. Remember, still there's no toll bypass because we are directly taking services from the telco registered telcos in India. So Johnson, that's how we are interpreting it. I think the government simply wants to make sure that there's no toll bypass, there is no interconnect problem anymore, right? So as long as somebody is legally paying for that telco and there is only one call happening, right? So there's one customer and one agent, and you basically routing the call. My interpretation and our stand at Ameyo is that we could now take, let's say, a private cloud infrastructure in Swiggy or even a public cloud, and have the calls terminated there, and then interconnect to a BPO and route calls. That's our interpretation, and we have actually started deploying this on our public cloud. So you could actually now terminate an agent on a browser. There is no dual call leg required, is our interpretation. Okay. Yeah, I mean, these were some of the points on the regulation. If there are, let me see if there are other questions. Surinder says, why we asked point number 2, because of the international, it was told that we need to use global SIP. As I mentioned that in case of international, they've clearly stated your PBX could be anywhere. My only doubt here is they would still want you to take SIP from somebody who is allowed to sell in India, right? Who's paying that telco license fees, or the international calls capability because you're terminating them in India. That's the only interpretation I have, but no problem having your PBX outside. Can the OSPs connect directly to PBX dialer platform owned, hosted, managed by their clients in the USA? I think we have answered that question. Yes, you can. Yeah, okay. So these are our interpretations of the guidelines. Let me come to the next very interesting part, which is once you have interpreted those, how is this going to change the industry, right? All of us are very focused on license, but I think there are bigger things that are going to happen because of this. So we're going to gaze into the crystal ball a little bit. First of all, we have been evangelizing the work from home or remote working, and we have done our calculation for a market like India. That's a 15 to 20% gross margin upside, guys. 15 to 20% is a gross margin of a BPO overall. So this means that your bottom lines could potentially double. Even if they are not doubling, you will pass on some of the benefits to the customers, and you'll become very competitive. In our view, people who can quickly, with agility, inculcate a hybrid or a remote kind of infrastructure, right? A tier 2 city or a remote infrastructure, you have huge cost savings that you could do. So you don't need those BPOs only to be there in Gurgaon or Delhi or Bangalore or Mumbai or Pune. You could have them in Nasik and Mysore or wherever you think the right workforce is available. So I will bring in Navneet here. Navneet, you look at the people function in Globiva. How are you guys thinking about what are the top 2-3 changes that you are thinking or strategizing because of the guideline change?
Thanks, Sachin. In fact, the guidelines has completely changed the way we look at the entire people aspect of it. It is very evident that we no longer look at the workforce only as the people who are going to come to our office to do the work. Actually, the entire pool of people that are available for the work has completely changed. We now look at people not just only at a tier 1 or a tier 2 city, even at a tier 3, tier 4 cities. As long as we have an agent who has the right skill set uh, and have the right tools, including a system and a smartphone, the person is just available to do the work with us. Um in our country, I think it is extremely important because a lot of contact center work, whether it is a customer service or a outbound work, is also a regional language work, which would mean that if you were to have a person who need to speak a South Indian language, we don't have to really hire a person based out of a tier 1 metro city. We just would need to go and have the set of people who would speak the same language dialect. In fact, the way we are also looking at is for example, if you were to look at resources who were to respond to the calls in Kannada language, uh, we would say that there are different dialect of Kannada language in different part of the Karnataka state itself. We don't have to really hire maybe 200 people in one go. We can hire maybe 30-40 people in one place, get them connected, and ensure that there is a right customer experience. The other aspect that we are also looking at, purely from a business optimization point of view, really is that a lot of commercials that we have with the customers, and I'm sure a lot of participants who are there in the call would also agree that our basis the per connect minute or a per call kind of arrangements, which would mean that we have a lot of time available in the day when uh, people really don't have enough work, which would mean that we would need to have people only for the peak hours. If we are Since we will now have most of the people working in work from home option, we will leverage the time available only for doing the peak hour work, and that is what is going to be really helping both the customers and us. The pool of the people also goes substantially because we are now leveraging a lot of, for example, housewives, a lot of people who are coming back home at say 5 p.m. back at home, and then they have time available and they are okay to do calling for maybe 2 to 3 hours in a day in the evening or a late evening hours. And that's when the peak hour happens for a lot of food companies like a Swiggy or a Zomato. A lot of these companies, the work happens, and those we can get them connected, and it's a win-win for everybody actually. So the whole strategy has completely changed, and it is a great thing because people don't have to really commute and they are sitting at home and doing the work.
Awesome. So for folks who are listening in, uh, not responding to this regulation change, is going to be a very big miss. I can tell you that, because industry is going to be super competitive. So there are folks like Globiva who are already strategizing around, hybrid tier 2, tier 3 remote. I also believe, and I completely agree with Navneet, a different kind of workforce, right? Something that you couldn't even imagine. So for example, uh, BPOs used to hire only freshers, right? That's the majority of the workforce, and then slowly they became process specialists. But how about hiring retired professionals and housewives who otherwise cannot commute, and have time available on their hand and are really super skilled about some of these things? Can we now skill them to do these works? I think there'll be more ownership on that side. They are more trainable, more coachable, and you would see a different kind of workforce coming in. So people who will now experiment around these things. There are no set models, right? Some leaders would emerge. I know in US there is a big workforce in the contact centers, which is comprising of people with disabilities, people with retired armed forces professional. Even government incentivizes that, because now that is feasible, right? And here are folks with discipline, who have strong work ethic, who can learn faster, which was some, attrition is not that longer a problem. The biggest number one problem in this industry is attrition. So this would have macro impacts in the coming time, and it's not just the architecture, IT regulation problem. I think it will change how the BPO business is happening. Suresh, let me bring in, do you think it will also lead to more outsourcing, because it has become so simple that you could interconnect, and let's say somebody like Swiggy, instead of contemplating should they have their own agents and all, would want to experiment with 2 or 3 providers very quickly and find out right partners. Do you think more outsourcers and more outsourcing would happen because of this?
It may happen, because I'm not sure, because even Swiggy or everyone, they won't cut the cost. So nobody willing to work for 8 hours. See, I want to work for only 3 hours, 4 hours for 50 agent, 100 agent. We have the capacity. Now I can say yes. So even I can do work from home, or I could do the work from office also. Or the people are working already from the office. Okay, they work from 8 to 10, morning 9 to 6. They reach a home for 7. So they want to work 7 to 10, 7 to 9, 2 hours they can work.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so that could be possible.
Yeah. So hiring without location constraints, ease of starting new outsourcing business, ease of outsourcing itself for captive, a potential saving of 15 to 20% of gross margin, more business and investments, even the international BPOs, because now they can augment by serving domestic also. You would see, earlier the pure international ones were not considering, because there was a lot of hassle in having those shared infrastructure, but they would also say that, why not run 3 shifts and make sure that we can use the infrastructure, so it'll become a little more competitive. And one big change is going to be the tier 2, tier 3 city. It's very, very easy. So you would find talent, and would allow them to work from where they are, right? So those are the big changes that we see. For the last 6 months, guys, Ameyo has been surveying and researching about remote in contact centers, both in India and the Philippines. And we have now cumulative surveyed about 300 plus. And this was prior to the DoT regulation, right? This was prior to the announcement that we are talking about. And 43% people were already thinking, even if it's dual call leg, it doesn't matter, we would run remote, right? Now think that how the numbers would switch. But 43% of them were already thinking that this is going to be long term because of the gross margin impact. Now that the government has removed any barrier, I see that the fringe 22% who already had implemented and they were thinking short term, some of them would definitely filter in. And people who were saying can't say will now think of this as a survivability question. You cannot survive in the BPO industry by continuing to doing what you were doing 6 months back. I can assure you that this will shake up the industry completely on how manpower or workforce is to be thought, how infrastructure is to be thought, how capex is to be thought, right? You would not block in your capital. Businesses become very, very fast. You will have short-term contracts, overflow calls coming in, and you need to be ready and grab those opportunities as they come, is my interpretation. And I've been talking to a lot of leaders in the industry. Okay, Navneet, I remember that you mentioned that a hybrid kind of approach, so there'll be 2, 3 kind of processes. Outbound could completely be, let's say, work from home. but tier 2, tier 3, you guys were thinking hub offices. Can you share that innovation, how you were thinking about tier 2, tier 3 smaller offices which could be used? How are you guys trying to go about it?
Sure, Sachin. In fact, uh, I think the entire strategy of moving into different and setting up a large contact center, for our go forward approach has completely changed. What we believe is that we will now need to have, uh, you know, centers who are literally just the hubs. So we would potentially have a center which would have been normally have about 2 3 400 maybe at least people. For us to really justify the economy of scale is no longer required, because what we are saying there is that we potentially will set up a center or a hub of maybe about 30 40 50 seater, who would then connect the remote agents within itself actually. uh, and therefore, instead of having a 3 to 400 people, we would just have a 30 40 seater area, and it is going to be connecting maybe about 200 agents who are sitting in work from home kind of a model. And the reason we have to set up this 30 40 seater center also is because when we are actually doing a work for some of the clients, for example in banking financial services clients, there are certain set of work which would need to be done out of office premises because of security, data privacy, etc., which can be potentially done from the smaller numbers, and the remaining work can be done clearly from work from home option. So the way we are looking at really is 80-20, kind of an approach wherein 80% of the people are actually going to be working from home, 20% will work from office, and that itself is going to be helping us a lot. That works in, for example, areas like banking financial services. In areas like where there is a regional language requirement, we would, for example, set up a center, in, for example, in Guwahati, which is maybe about 20-30 seaters, and then it is going to take care of the rest of the requirement of Northeast India. So that strategy we believe is going to be really helpful. The It also helps it from capex perspective significantly for us, because we no longer have to really spend a lot of capex in setting up a center, ensuring the right infrastructure is there. Uh, so the physical infrastructure capex requirement is gone, literally. The technology infrastructure requirement is gone. Like you rightly mentioned, we potentially don't have to really put up an in-premise solution actually. It would need to be on cloud, which would mean that the biggest barrier that anybody would have was to get the compliance requirement done, which is completely gone away with. Setting up a physical infrastructure is practically gone away with. Only 10-20% is left. The entire requirement on technology infrastructure setup to a great extent is gone away. We can just set up a OPEX model through cloud.
Sure.
So it really helps us out.
Thanks, Navneet. That's really useful for the audience. There are a lot more questions that have come in. Nadeem is again persisting that it clearly mentions that shared infrastructure is within group companies. No, it says that two OSPs can interconnect now. It very clearly states that. So given that who would you call an OSP? Somebody who's using voice. So for example, one potential interpretation could be Ameyo is an OSP and Globiva is an OSP, and we basically interconnect between the two as long as we don't toll bypass, right? So I think Johnson's question also gets answered. Johnson, I think both you and me are going to do this for our customers, wherein we can host a private cloud depending on the scale and choice of that company, or use the public cloud services. Think of ourselves as a OSP and interconnect, right? There is still an interpretation of state toll bypass that needs to be clarified there, and that's only one gray area. But we have started already deploying some of these things and talking to the experts that how do we interpret it further. I'm being very upfront, guys, because I think, as I stated, we have not seen such clarity from the government. So we are doing this with a positive intent, right? We think that government wants this to happen, and they don't want like reading between the lines and trying to catch you, because there is absolutely no regulation now, right? There is no license now, right? So that's the biggest statement that the government can make, that as long as you guys feel you guys are not shortchanging the telcos, it is okay. Somebody from a captive is saying, from a regulatory perspective, do I need telemarketing license now? I don't think so. That is what OSP used to be. You still need to comply to DNC and stuff like that. So you can't be randomly calling people. I think any interpretation there is telemarketing different from OSP? Is there if I want to do outbound calls, I think those regulations remain unchanged, right? So if you
Yeah,
have,
still remain. OSP is different. Telemarketing is different. So if you really want to do any sales, you have to do for 140 the series.
yeah.
Then you should have that price certificate for that. They're completely different.
Yeah, because remember that has more to do with D&D, which is that you can't be just randomly calling people and selling them stuff if they have registered on, let's say, DNC services. Those penalties still apply. This is not a bypass of that particular set, and I think for right reasons. So if somebody is registered with DNC and they file a complaint with that number is still, can still be mapped to you, and that is why CDRs etc. are required for us to prove that who actually made that call and so on and so forth. Do we need separate sitting for international domestic agents? Now the same agent can handle for international and domestic. The answer is yes. You are allowed to interconnect as long as you're not toll bypassing, right? So you can have the same agent doing international, domestic. PBX can be shared. You don't need separate network infrastructure. You have to make sure that you're not toll bypassing. That's the only thing they say. Rest everything is okay. Can a non-voice international OSP share common resources such as internet connectivity with other company OSP who is domestic voice based? Both the companies are part of the group. Iba Kalra, I think the answer is yes. Especially for non-voice, it doesn't matter, right? But if you're saying you're sharing voice infrastructure, which means technically they will classify you as an OSP. So if you're making calls with a shared infrastructure, sharing of infrastructure is allowed. Interconnect of infrastructure between two OSPs is allowed. So sharing and interconnect are two different things. Just remember that. Sharing means that on the same infrastructure, you have multiple guys logging in. Interconnect means one infrastructure and two infrastructure can talk to each other. So that's the technical definition between the two. Can call center buy minutes from foreign companies? That's a gray area, guys. Who are you buying minutes from? I would request somebody who is allowed to sell minutes in India. That's my only advice here. I don't have, because there are so many other minute providers, these SIP providers, which might constitute as toll bypass. That's the only thing that I wanted to say. I work for a company that qualifies data processing category. We use a telephony. Can we maintain partitioning between cities? Can I remove partitioning between city states? Can I do intelligent call routing between cities and PSTN? Guys, so as long as the other states or other places, it's your own company's infrastructure or your own company's agent, my interpretation of the guideline is that is allowed today. So for example, and I will be on the spot and state this. So let's say that you have your infrastructure in Delhi and your agent or your remote office is in Bangalore. You could still route these calls because this is within the group company OSP is my interpretation. I'll end it at that, right? So this is not a toll bypass because you're within the company, right? So your agent could be logging in from Delhi, your agent could be logging in from Bangalore as long as he's in India and in the same OSP, it is okay. Is what my understanding is. Ashish, any different interpretation here?
You're right. While the question from Nitin was if they are only the data processing category, obviously they are not OSP. But even if they are using any kind of IP telephony for inter-office communication, that I believe it is allowed already.
Yeah. Okay. I should officially say that this is most number of questions in one webinar that I have got. So obviously this is a hot topic. We also surveyed about the same 300 folks that what do they think was the biggest challenge apart from compliance, right? So now that the compliance challenge is gone, which hurdles should you think to solve before you can think going remote and remote for long term? And the biggest point there was the governance and security. And I keep giving this example that in a BPO, if let's say an agent says I have a problem, there is an IT guy immediately accessible. The network is completely controlled, managed, and you would solve the problem. But if the same thing is happening from home, do you trust the network? Do you trust the device, or do you trust the agent? Right. So there's going to be a different kind of monitoring that will be required. It's not as simple as taking your on-prem infrastructure and putting a VPN and having the agent log in from home. You could technically do that, but that will create different kind of problems. Your internal IT will get bombarded with issues. Your call quality will go down because agent might have network problems. So you need something that can proactively monitor devices, networks, and do intelligent routing basis that. So let's say if some area is having network issues, those agents will not get calls. It's as simple as that. You could interpret it that way. So if you're measuring latency across devices and across networks, you can route calls to whoever has the best network right now, right? So why only a FIFO or a LIFO algorithm for ACD? Why not a network-based algorithm, right? So we have already done some of these things, and some of our customers are already using it. But that's the biggest problem. And the second is security. Can you make sure that that data can be completely masked? I still believe that. Okay, let me put Suresh and Navneet on a spot here. So, what kind of processes do you think will not go remote, right? And what are your customers saying to you guys?
What kind of process? You mean maybe banking process should not go out, and even we do aviation, that should not go out because a lot of customer information there. There's two things. So apart from that, I don't. Then again, healthcare. Three things. So three major things. Apart from that, I don't think so. Other data can go out. Only thing, as you said, we are already doing. We are asking the customer mobile number first. So name doesn't matter. Okay, so we're asking the customer mobile number at all the points. So any point, the agent doesn't know to whom they are talking. They know I'm talking to Sachin or talking to Ashish. That's all. Okay, you have some relationship with the XYZ bank or NBFC. We are going to talk about either outstanding or loan or product, anything. That's all. So that is one of the advantages now.
Ashish, Navneet, anything from you guys?
So from our perspective, Sachin, I think one thing is very clear, that wherever an agent has to access a customer financial information, I think those are the areas where customers are quite wary of this, including access of mobile phone of the customers. And there are tools that they're building in terms of masking the phone numbers, etc. So I think that's one area which is still a border. The other area which we believe is also where a customer or where an agent is required to access critical customer applications to process. There I think they are also to a great extent, resisting right now. And I think in some cases where the volume is fairly high, they are actually trying to build a solution as to how do they segregate this, wherein they can give an access to a certain level of their systems to a agent who's sitting at home versus the one which are actually going to be working in the office. And therefore, I believe, for a large contact center, hybrid model is what is going to be working. It may start with 30-70, 30% in office and 70% work from home, but eventually I believe it is going to move to 10-90. I don't think it is going to become 0-100 at any stage, which is going to be really difficult. But I think it will easily move to 10-90, depending on the type of work it is there.
Absolutely. And okay, I will give you a long-term view on this. So obviously, right now, banks, healthcare, there are a lot of regulations around it. If I'm a BPO, my first question to my customer would be that how many of your applications are on cloud? And if they say 0, then the trust level on some of these processes. So technically speaking, you could have any kind of process running from home, and there could be security. For example, recording not allowed, screenshots not allowed. You can only look at data that you are talking to right now. You could mask data. You could mask stuff from recording, and all that has been happening. So I think from a technology standpoint, any process can move out, but you would have early adopters. And for the first time, a bank like HDFC Bank, I've seen evaluating public cloud options on some of their applications, right? This is path breaking in India. Even somebody like an SBI opted for a public cloud CRM. So there are some very big changes at a macro level that are happening, and these are being forced with obviously cost of managing infrastructure, but also that accessibility of some of the applications is no longer there in on-prem, right? If you want to do AI, if you want to do large-scale data analytics, processing, some of these capabilities are only available on cloud. So whether a process is to be pitched to be moved remote would be dependent on how open are those guys or how comfortable are those guys with this. But I completely agree with Navneet. Some of them would require strict compliance, like healthcare, personally identifiable data, financial data. There are some other regulations around it that you cannot move it outside of the premise. Like we were doing video KYC, and none of the data is allowed to be stored anywhere outside of India, whatever be the scenario, right? So some of them are still good regulations for right reasons. We have seen how GDPR has evolved in Europe. So I think personally identifiable information would become critical, that you manage those. So that's IT governance and the security. The second category was onboarding and collaboration. So if an agent is already in your system, he knows what to do. But BPO is a very tribe-centric thing. A new guy comes in, he learns from the floor. But let's say if you're now onboarding new people completely remote, how would they learn? If they had a doubt, how would they go in? So I think onboarding, collaboration, training would change. Uh, Let me bring in Navneet. Navneet, how do we train the young or even the new workforce that would come in? And would something change there?
So Sachin, I think what really has helped us to change the mindset is the fact that the entire education system of the country in this financial year, even the kids who are in KG classes are getting trained, and they are actually going to be completing this session. So the whole, the entire thought process is completely changed over the entire nation per se. So we believe that if the school going children are going to be taught through remotely, and then I'm sure, the entire training is being done in a very, very proper manner. The result has been outstanding, because what is really happening is that once a person gets onboarded, the tools which are available, including platforms like Zoom, and so many other platforms are there, and some platforms are actually given to us by clients themselves. They have given the platforms, and then it is much easier, and most experienced trainers are actually training the staff, because there is no limitation on of 15-20 people to be trained in a room. You can actually have more participants who are getting trained, and there are tools available which checks the efficacy of the entire training output. And we have seen the certification percentage, which typically in the industry hovers between 75 to 85%, has actually gone significantly higher. And The other most critical aspect for our industry has been the retention of the staff. Actually, it has seen such a positive movement over the last few months that there is hardly any attrition. So a lot of hiring has been happening just to backfill the staff. If the attrition is not happening, there is no need to backfill the staff and hence train them. So
Wow.
this has really happened in a positive way.
Yeah. So as I said, one, I foresee that attrition would reduce. New training methodologies. I'll tell you one of the discussions I had with a very young BPO owner, about 1,000-seat BPO owner in the Philippines, and he said that he actually already remodeled his office and obviously reduced capacity. But he said office is now a place to bond and learn, and work is the place to home is the place to work. So people are going to come to office to bond, to form the culture, to learn, right? uh, and make sure that they feel the part of the tribe. I think someday that will also be cracked. In the software space, you have had companies where people have not even seen each other, right? There are great SaaS companies where one guy is in Poland, one guy is in San Francisco, one guy is in Gurgaon, and the 10 people team. But you will have 1,000 people teams who have not been to one place, right? So how do you bring that tribe culture? You bring them to a certain place, you give them the message, you train them, you form a culture, and then you go back and start working. So I visualize that, and that's what he said. Last challenge that people were saying with remote is how you monitor operations. I think that would change. There has to be a very real time view of the business, and agents will become more entrepreneurial in my view. They will own outcomes rather than own functional KPIs. So for example, average handling time is a great KPI, but NPS or a conversion will become even more important, and agents are directly going to be calmed on that. And that is why I see more mature workforce coming in. But Suresh, would you want to interpret it? Do you think that how you would monitor a remote workforce, what KPIs would you monitor? Will that fundamentally change from functional to more business centric, or is it going to remain the same?
Fundamentally change, Sachin. I think we have seen 2 3 months before, and monitoring them. How what is the AST for them? That is some main thing. Everybody, all the client will ask, what is the AST? So AST for let's say work from office, let's say 3 hours. The work from home should be 3 hours, or should be 10% less, or should be more. More is a little bit difficult. That's what we thought. But after implementing so many tracking mechanism, and with the help of you, and we have seen around 15% the talk time is high
Hmm, hmm, hmm,
for
hmm,
work from home.
hmm,
Okay. then we are insisting some agent here in, so the work from home is high because obviously they have a lot of disturbance sometimes because they are working through remote. Obviously, work from office should be high. Then that's what mindset. That's the people mindset before. Now the people mindset is entirely changed. So since we have a lot of tracking mechanism, work from home ASP is increased. Even the performance also increased. We have seen the data because we are talking through data only. But obviously, we have seen the data, and we showed our client also. Now they convinced. Most of the client, no, 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 I don't want work from home because I want work from office because the performance is high. Now they're saying, no, no, I don't have any problem. As long as work is done, we don't have any problem. Data is secured. As long as work is done, we don't have any problem. That's what people mentality now.
Yeah. So, so Suresh actually was an early adopter, and they went. I think we were the. I think they were the early ones who challenged us that how are we going to manage it, and we experimented a lot with first a VPN, then a mobile application and stuff like that, right? And we realized that they moved up their productivity from remote quite sharp. I mean, there was a immediate decline, and then we were able to bring it up. And I think the focus then became that let's not look at purely a functional, lowest level KPI, and let's focus on the business KPIs. And eventually you have to make agents or team leaders responsible for those KPIs rather than, because see, the functional KPI or AHT, it enforces a certain discipline on a behavior, right? In a team. So that's why you have those wall boards stating the SLAs this much, and I think those are going to be still critical, but agents will own their results and own their outcomes more, right? Teams will own their results and own their outcomes more. Remote teams can do it better, and you will find a different kind of workforce is how we interpret it. So gentlemen, these are the three top challenges in the order of priority. So if you guys have thought about going remote, these are the next three steps that you have to think about, that how are you going to handle and tackle some of these things in long run. So the next four, next actionable, first of all, be future ready, remote ready. Even if you're not immediately moving it, my recommendations would be that don't invest on capex, don't tie your infrastructure to one location. That should be the first easy step for you to take. um, uh, you know Make your workforce aware about challenges of remote, make your team leaders aware of, start experimenting. I'm sure pandemic has already, all of us have already done that, but how would you train, how would you monitor, and a bottom up approach, not just a top down from strategy. Throw them the challenge that how would we make sure that remote is equally, if not more efficient. uh, uh, relook at relook at the current operations completely if you want to, right? You would have designed this basis the previous guidelines, like what we heard from Globiva. You could have hub structure where you would end up reducing real estate cost, which is a very big cost in a contact center. I think the second largest cost, if I remember correctly. And then make sure that you are investing in a remote ready technology partner. It's not just Ameyo. I think there are a lot of players who are taking a leap in how remote would run, and we are very proud that we have moved about 50,000 agents in remote infrastructure. We were early movers, but we believe that it augurs well for the whole industry. Like we have folks from Avaya also here today. I think people who can move to IP faster, who can have remote monitoring, device monitoring, and different kind of dashboards available faster would win this battle from a provider standpoint. And people who are flexible with their agent KPIs, the kind of workforce and moving remote will win as BPOs. Yeah, I think those were things that we wanted to discuss. Let me see if there are any other questions. Otherwise, we are right on time. In fact, 5 minutes over. Um, these were some of the questions that had been filled on the form. So let me see if something that we have not answered. How is CRM data, especially PII, secured? This question is a little, I mean, this would stay in general true also. It doesn't have to be only with remote. So basically, like I think Navneet mentioned or Suresh mentioned that, can we have role-based access? Can we have, for example, if somebody is outside of office and logging in from there, he will only see minimal information, whereas somebody logging in from a trusted network can see all the information. There are functionalities and technologies available to do that. way forward for WFH and connecting multiple OSPs, just do it. I mean, if you are an OSP and there's another OSP and you want to interconnect because of overflow, or if the client is an OSP and you want overflow calls, you can now very simply do that. There is no PRI infrastructure of the client required or of one OSP required at the other OSP side. Somebody again asked that question, how would the government track if we are using minutes from somebody who's not hosting in India? Man, I don't know, but I would not want to think about it again, because now that the government has been so liberal, if anybody is caught doing something hanky-panky, I think penalties would be even higher. So that toll bypass thing is very, very, very clearly stated. So we should take pride that government is taking a forward-looking step and not try to interpret it in any other way. Has DoT given consent to use cloud-based platform for taking business-related calls? As I said, Ameyo's interpretation, and again, this is my view of this. If any voice-based somebody who's using voice as a process is an OSP, and here is another OSP, we can interconnect between the two, and hence we could potentially host you on cloud on public infrastructure also and take it. We are still reading this, but on private infrastructure, this is definitely allowed. So I could host one infrastructure for Globiva and have any of their agents log in. That's definitely not a challenge. Even on public cloud, we have started giving. You don't need dual legs anymore in India. You could actually have your agents log in from the WebRTC, it's a very familiar interface for Ameyo users. You would already know that. And we continue to read about it. If there are any specific questions, I think a few companies had asked us as part of the form also. I will arrange a call with Mohit, our solution consultant, to discuss in detail. Yeah, I mean, these were the questions, guys. Ashish, Suresh, Navneet, thank you so much. If there are no more questions, Shaista, we can wrap up. We've already 7 minutes over time. And ladies and gentlemen, I should tell you that I have done about 40-50 webinars. I have not seen such interaction in a webinar. So thank you so much for the curiosity, for the whole community, including competition. It doesn't matter. Thank you so much for coming and joining us. Ashish, Suresh, Navneet, ever grateful for your business and your time and attention. Thank you so much.
So Sachin, there's one more question. You're getting it again and again from Amod from My Insurance Club. He says it's an insurance comparison website. Want to know what we need to do from a regulatory perspective. We don't have a telemarketing license now. How Ameyo will chip in?
So Amod, first of all, so let's interpret that you are a captive and you want to make calls to people who fill form on your website. That's the most often use case for telemarketing. If you are making telemarketing calls, right, that has got nothing to do with. So first, if you wanted to set up a call center which is doing sales, there's a telemarketing registration as a telemarketer. You're making outbound calls. You have to comply to DND. You have to take their consent to do the call. All that is still there. The only thing is the infrastructure required. There were other complexities around it that should you need a OSP license? Should you have an infrastructure here? What if you had an office in Bangalore and office in Gurgaon? How would you handle that? All that is taken care of. If you're a mid-sized business, you take services from somebody like Ameyo, have your agents log into the browser and they can start making calls. However, you still need to make sure that you're not making unsolicited calls. There is a TRAI DND regulation. You cannot bypass any. OSP says nothing about all those things. Please don't interpret it that way, right? If, Suresh, you want to add anything as an advice to this small captive?
That is what I said. No, OSP and LA different from ITRA, so you should not, get confused on that. So if anybody want to do any sales related thing, they should, especially they're doing calling, they should have that telemarketing certificate. That's all.
Sure.
So obviously, should go from 140 service. That's that.
Sure. And Surinder asks, is there anybody on Ameyo who can give guidance on DoT guidelines? We are technical experts. We are not consultants. We don't advise. But as I said, we have taken a forward step and we are interpreting it liberally, the way government wants us to do. Happy to have our consultants talk to you, Surinder, if you want that. But do read the guidelines. It's very simple, right? 2 pages, very simple to read and very clear intent to interpret. So please do that also, and happy to talk to you about this. Okay, guys, I think I will not take more time from our guests. We are all sort of scheduled for our next calls. Thank you so much, guys. We'll be in touch. And we'll do a follow-up webinar on this because there is so much curiosity on we'll try and observe how the industry is changing maybe in a few weeks. So we'll definitely have you guys again over sometime. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Thank
Sachin.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Navneet.
Bye. Bye.
Thank you, everyone. In
Thank
case
you all.
you have any more questions, you can always write to us. We will be happy to reply you all back. Well, we appreciate you all being here. Before signing off, I would request all the attendees to fill up a small survey that will pop up while closing the webinar window. Thank you again for joining us today. Thank you, everyone.